I don't think it's about technologies. It's about the mentality. It's not about developing something specific. It's about changing the mentality.
In this episode of The Insider, we dive into one of Europe's most ambitious digital initiatives, the EU's important project of common European interest for cloud and edge computing, and how it's reshaping the future of digital infrastructure across the continent. Joining us is Dr. Alberto Martí, Vice President of Open Source Innovation at OpenNebula Systems and Chair of the Industry Facilitation Group for this major initiative. Together, we'll explore how this project is not just about technology, but about Europe's digital sovereignty, open source innovation, and creating a federated, secure and sustainable cloud infrastructure. We'll unpack the 4 key workstreams driving this initiative and discuss the challenges and breakthroughs in areas like federated edge computing, interoperability, and cybersecurity. What does this mean for Europe's competitive position in the global digital economy? How are research institutions, companies, and 12 member states working together to reduce reliance on non-European cloud providers? Join us as we explore the technological innovations and governance behind this groundbreaking project, diving into the critical challenges of creating a more open, secure, and competitive digital future for Europe. Will this initiative be the key to transforming Europe's digital landscape and reshaping the global balance in cloud computing?
Welcome to today's episode of The Insider. I am Ricardo Miguez and I'm joined by Alberto Martí. Thank you, Alberto, for being here. Alberto is the Vice President of Open Source Innovation at OpenNebula Systems and the Chair of the Industry Facilitation Group for the IPCEI-CIS. I've just found out that we can say IPCEI, and this is the usual thing to do, which is the important project of common European interest, and in this case, dedicated to cloud and cloud services. So, Alberto, you have been at the forefront of Europe's cloud, and you've been working with this edge computing landscape for a long time. Today, I would like to start by exploring a little bit of your career. How did you get there? What motivations? And then our focus would be on how this initiative is really set to transform or is promising to transform Europe's digital infrastructure. I mean, if it deploys, if it delivers what it says, and we will go into that, it really is very, very promising. So before we dive deep into this, thanks again for coming, and just tell me, how are you today?
Thank you, Ricardo. I think it's a great opportunity to be here, and thank you very much for the invitation. We launched this project a few months ago. It's after a very long process of preparing this initiative and negotiations. Also, it was dependent on the final approval from the European Commission that happened in December 2023. So it's been a long way. So I'm really happy to be here to be able to explain a bit more about this sometimes cryptic but very important project.
Yeah, let's make it much less cryptic. And to do that, I'd love to hear more about your professional background. Can you tell us about your journey in the tech industry, because it is very interesting, particularly your work with OpenNebula Systems and how you now come to play such an important role in the European cloud and edge computing with this new role of chairing this important group in the IPCEI.
Okay, yep. So, my career is a bit eclectic, so I will try to focus on the tech industry.
We like eclectic.
Yes, I also have a background in it sounds exotic, on the archaeology of counterinsurgency, which hopefully I don't know. Happily, I don't have to apply that often in my current position.
That's very interesting. Very interesting.
My career in tech started started to 2000s, and I was working in Spain in one of the first consultancy companies on working on Linux and open source after studying computer engineering. And then I took a sabbatical for around 10 years or so, and then I came back to the tech sector a few years ago. In 2019, I joined OpenNebula Systems, working on the open source side. Then gradually I moved more into the innovation as we were starting to, thanks to the support from the Commission, starting to invest more resources on developing edge computing solutions. OpenNebula still is a cloud management platform, but we are expanding it to embrace this new concept of cloud edge continuum that's now very popular. So that took me here after several years working on different initiatives, including the preparation of this IPCEI.
It's I find that people who have a very eclectic background usually end up having also an ease with this overview of these very complex and cryptic, in this case, projects, as you've mentioned, and it's good to hear. So what I would like to explore a little bit more in this process of you becoming elected as chair of the Industry Facilitation Group is what is the role of that you have now at this IPCEI, and how can you relate that to your previous experiences? What can they contribute for this leadership position?
Well, I guess many of our listeners will have experience in European projects, Horizon 2020, Horizon Europe. I am still involved in some of the projects that we run. My first reaction to this IPCEI is, okay, it has nothing to do, despite being EU funding, it has nothing to do with what I knew about research and innovation projects at EU level, because it's very, very peculiar. So it's almost weird the way that it works. If we come from the kind of the traditional research and development project from maybe Horizon 2020, it's very, very different. One of the aspects is the governance. So the governance of these projects, these IPCEI projects, come from the political will of member states. In this case, this comes from a declaration in 2020 from the 27 member states about the need to develop these sovereign technologies for cloud and edge computing in Europe. With support from the European Commission, these projects are defined and they are refined as well to make sure that they comply with a number of regulations, mainly or mostly state aid regulation and competition law. To make sure that even if we are fixing what's identified as a market failure, even if a state aid is provided to private companies to do something in the market, that doesn't disrupt the market too much. So it's very, very clear. And then in the end, we are around 100 partners. Each of these partners responds to their member state, but we have an overall structure, governance structure on top. And my role is taking care of that overall structure that brings together these 100 companies and organizations in the General Assembly and relate to the European Commission and the member states. We call them the supervisory board.
So you are, I know those terms. They are common across all those type of constructs that we have across our beloved European Union. So I was going to go back a step and try to explain to people what, and then myself actually, in detail, if you can, what is an IPCEI? What is an important project of common European interest? First of all, without the cloud part before, and then we go into the cloud part. Well,
it's a very peculiar mechanism for providing, as I mentioned, a state aid, and that's the difference. So it is somehow an intervention in something where the European Union and the member states identified that there's a failure, that the market by itself is not going to fix the situation. So that we've seen people that are familiar with this kind of more strategic initiatives at the European level might be familiar with the IPCEI on microelectronics or the hydrogen. So we are at that level. So we are one of these main strategic projects where the European Union says, okay, we have to intervene in this market because otherwise it's not going to fix by itself. What happens afterwards is that member states come together. A number of member states, that doesn't necessarily mean all 27, they come together and they say, okay, we are able and we are willing to invest money in bringing together projects from different companies, from different member states to work together under an integrating project to fix a specific market or fix a specific situation in the market. So we are fixing the cloud market.
Yeah, so in this particular case, you are saying that there is a market failure in the cloud market.
Yes.
First, before the why, what is that market failure, right? And then why are we addressing it like we are? But let's break it down into parts. What is that market failure in the cloud system, in the cloud infrastructures and services system? Because we are talking about something that is cuts across the majority of our services produced today across the world, not just in Europe.
Our lives, the life of every single European citizen is dependent on probably on a cloud service.
Yeah. So what is the market failure there? What's not working?
Well, there are a number of concerns in Europe about the situation with this specific aspect of the technology market, and that is mainly the slow pace at which European companies are adopting the public cloud, how worried they are about the dependencies that they develop with non-European technology providers and cloud providers. But mostly, I think the main point here is what we can define as an oligopolistic structure of the market. So there are very few actors dominating this market, and they happen not to be European, any of them. So what we see across Europe is an increasingly deep dependency, strategic dependency on very large big tech corporations. And that's a problem because this also is limiting the capacity of European companies to emerge in that market and compete in that market because of a number of tactics, you can call them, like acquisitions, things like that. So we are seeing that it's increasingly difficult for European companies to survive in this sector. And we need also one of the aspects that are we doing and to be besides the technology to allow that as well.
Okay, so but the IPCEI is not only related to the technology, related to the process of creating or supporting the creation and development of stronger companies in Europe that can take the place of those larger, probably US, but also perhaps even Chinese or Korean, I don't know, companies that are leading the market at the moment.
Yes. I think it's not about taking the place or replacing them or going against them. We are doing this at the same time that the edge computing market is emerging. So the whole concept here is that there is a new market emerging now in Europe, and that is edge computing, a distributed infrastructure, as opposed to a centralized infrastructure based on these large data centers.
Yeah.
So there's this new market emerging now. It will require new deployment of infrastructure across the continent. Let's make sure that new market is not as well controlled by these big non-EU corporations. So let's make sure that new market brings that we can bring balance at least to that new market, as we expect companies and governments to rely more and more on these resources that are closer to the users.
So it's not just about creating or taking a competitive stance against large companies in a specific market niche of action that exists at the moment. Is trying to leapfrog in order to be ahead in a sector of that is emerging, mm-hmm. and where you consider that there is space, and the Commission considered, and many member states consider that there is space to invest, and it's worth investing.
Yeah, it's also about preventing what we see in the cloud market, trying to minimize this dominance of non-EU corporations in the cloud market. by making sure that also the edge computing market is much more balanced in that sense. And for that, we need the technology to help new companies to become edge infrastructure providers, for instance. We need technologies to help the telco operators federate their new resources and offer them the market. So that technology that we don't have now to create this continuum, that's where we're building
which is the
cloud.
bridge with the edge computing part.
Exactly. We're building the operating system of the new cloud edge continuum. And that involves making easier also for companies to migrate out of a traditional public cloud provider into a more localized infrastructure. So we want to create this new ecosystem of, let's say, proximity clouds, and assuming as we assume and we understand at the European level that these kind of local infrastructure is going to be more and more in demand.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. There's only good things about that. If we look at other power regions in the world, I mean, how can we not be doing that for a longer period of time already? Because, you know, the subsidies that have been given directly or indirectly to companies to achieve that dimension, not only the dynamic internal market in the case of the US, but also the direct subsidies in other parts of the world are really a thing that we have been not doing for a long time. Do you think that this is the critical goal of Cloud IPCEI?
I think the IPCEI, I would call it the IPCEI model. So beyond what we're doing specifically for the cloud market, I think the IPCEI itself is a different model for two different things. One of them is it breaks the traditional dichotomy between the investment in local or national industry and the European champions. So we're not discussing about should we put all our money or investments in a big European company to compete against the Americans. It's not that. It's not either the allowing every member state to invest their money in their own local companies as they want. It's something in between. It's creating collaboration among many different member states, many different companies within those member states to start working together. And one of the most fascinating things here is to see companies that are still competitors in different markets to collaborate together within the IPCEI and tell you, okay, I mean, since a few years ago, it wasn't even allowed to speak to these people. If I came across them in a conference, I wasn't allowed to speak to my competitors from across the border. So that thing, I think the IPCEI as a model of state aid breaks this kind of paralysis that sometimes we have in Europe between these two models, the protectionist at the national level, the member state level, and the champion, this idea of a European champion.
And at the same time,
yeah.
It's something that allows for a coherence, or at least a complementarity, bringing complementarity of capacities and competencies from across Europe. So I'm assuming that the reason why certain countries have analyzed and thought, okay, we will co-fund this investment is because we think we have or can have that capacity in our territory, and we will contribute with that and be part of this distributed capacity for competitiveness in the cloud services area and edge computing.
Yeah, exactly. It's a change of mentality as well. I mean, towards a closer integration also in what I will define also this second major benefit of this IPCEI model, which is ensuring that there is an EU alternative. And that's not that easy in several markets. So it's not about protecting the market against non-EU competitors. It's making sure that you protect the existence of an alternative in Europe.
No, I like that.
That afterwards we'll have to compete with the others, but at least there is an alternative. Whereas now in the cloud market, there is no major alternatives. I mean, there are obviously cloud providers, but
there is value in that, in the way that you are putting things, and in the way that the IPCEI, the cloud IPCEI, at least is putting things, which is not closing, but actually empowering. That's very, very, very valuable in my point of view, and very aligned with European values. So talking about aligning with the EU, how does the IPCEI, the Cloud IPCEI, connect with other EU initiatives like Digital Compass, for example?
They are the ones to blame for this, I guess. I mean, there is. If you look at the Digital Compass, there are these. Some of the objectives are very interesting. There's this objective of deploying or having 10,000 edge nodes deployed across the union by the end of the decade. So, and then the question obviously is, okay, well, we are always discussing what an edge node is, but beyond that, it's how we put this in place in a way that people can actually use it, because we can have thousands of nodes, we can have tens of thousands of nodes, but how can we abstract all this complexity to an application developer that doesn't care about the infrastructure, but the cloud is almost like a commodity that we need to make things very, very easy. And that's where the technology that we are building comes into the game.
Okay, so one of the things that my experience tells me from this kind of very big projects across Europe is, and across the time, is the fact that you just mentioned you have a goal, which is very good. You have a very concrete goal, 10,000 edge nodes across Europe. But then you've mentioned we don't even know exactly the concept of edge node. I've seen that in other fields. And that usually is the Achilles heel of some of these projects. So why 10,000 edge nodes, and what is the rationale behind that?
Yeah. So the IPCEI is not a project that is going to fund or subsidize the deployment of this infrastructure. So what we're building now is the technology that will be able to manage those 10,000 nodes, plus the aggregation of different cloud providers, telco edge providers. So we're talking about the technology that we need to run that continuum that we were talking about before, and we call it the data center cloud edge continuum, because it has to allow a company to make the most out of these infrastructure providers out there. So maybe a company that has its own data centers, or a government, they need to at some point consume cloud resources from a cloud provider, maybe a hyperscaler in Europe or maybe outside Europe. But they also need at some point to consume resources from a telco edge in some part of the territory. So the complexity is the combination of these different resources. That's the kind of technology that's missing. That's the one that we are building for the IPCEI. The abstraction layer that you need on top of this very, very different infrastructure that an application then needs to communicate with to deploy easily across this continuum.
That's very much related with the critical issues that the IPCEI tries to address, and actually they add critical pillars like interoperability and cybersecurity and sustainability of all of that. Let's go deep into that in a minute, but before that, let's try to understand a little bit more what is the current constitution of the cloud IPCEI. So I know that when I was researching for this conversation, I've noticed that it started with 7 participant member states. Then all of a sudden I saw on the website that after all there were 12 member states, and they were all involved in the project governance structure. That also increased dramatically the number of entities that were involved, and they were, I think, all of them, the entities, private entities that like small and medium companies and large companies, but also some research performing organizations. So how can you describe the composition of IPCEI? How can you see? How would you describe it? Are its main strengths and main weaknesses?
Okay. So yeah, then the mentions the different member states is a bit confusing. I agree. We also have something called direct participants and indirect participants, which add to the confusion. So right now the project is led by and supported by 12 member states. These all originated from was coordinated initially by Germany and France, These 7 member states that you will see, for instance, in the approval of the decision of the Commission to approve the IPCEI, those are the member states that have direct participants. That means that, including OpenNebula Systems, for instance, in Spain, our individual projects have had to go through the formal approval from the European Commission. That is DG Connect, but also DG Competition. There are, so those 7 member states, as I mentioned, Germany and France, Hungary, Italy, the Netherlands, Poland, and Spain. And then there are other member states whose companies don't have to go through this process because they are managing the fund. They're funding them in a different way. So they are funding them through what's called the General Block Exemption Regulation, or GBER. So these decisions are taken at member state level, and those are Belgium, Croatia, Latvia, Luxembourg, and Slovenia. In the end, we are around 100 organizations coming, mostly private companies, but also some research and innovation organizations, and we are all part of this project in equal share. So we are around, I represent in that sense, these 100 entities working up across these 12 member states, each of them with their project. That's the funny bit.
A huge challenge, but I'm assuming you have a board that provides the executive and strategic direction of the project along the time, right? I mean, it's very recent. It's only November 2023.
We have the first General Assembly in Brussels in March. That's where the facilitation group, as we call it, the Industry Facilitation Group, but it's the governance body that brings together the different worker streams of the project. So there are 4 worker streams with different companies contributing with different resources and different scopes of the projects. So the facilitation group that I chair we are 10 people, 2 representatives per worker stream. Then there is a vice chair, and then there's a chair. The vice chair and the chair represent also the 100 companies and the facilitation group before the supervisory board, which is composed of the member states and also the Commission as observers.
Yeah, the typical distributed pyramidal kind of structure.
The interesting thing here is that each company with a project is responsible before the member states of their own project. So we respond to our member state. But at the same time, which is the entity that the funding body is the member state in the end. But at the IPCEI level, we have some KPIs and a global commitment for the integration of these different projects at European level. So in the end, each company, its partners, responsible for their individual project before the member state. But then we all have, as part of the responsibility.
But the project itself has goals that are European.
Exactly, yeah. And all projects are aligned to those objectives. But in the end, the ones that we to say, okay, you meet this KPI and your project's into your member state. And then the Commission will supervise, along with all member states, the integration aspect of the project, which is one of the vital.
I mean, we could go so much in.
Yeah. This could be
because it's really interesting.
It's very interesting. Yeah.
Also from the point of view of synergies, because the Commission and the EU institutions and all of us that have been working in this area for many years, we've been trying relentlessly to facilitate the synergistic use of instruments and funds. And so here the IPCEI comes with a model that seems to me to work very well. It has a catch, which is a 50% co-fund of the member state.
Well, that depends. That depends on the company and the member state, all that. So it is a co-investment mechanism. So there is. That's why if you look at the announcement, it talks about 1,200 million euros in state aid, in public aid. But there is also a commitment that what makes these IPCEI almost 3,000 million euros, because there is a commitment from the private companies to co-invest in the long term. I mean, the proposals involved a long-term planification also of the revenues that this innovation was going to bring to the company in 20, 30 years ahead. So it's been a long process. But yeah, there is a strong investment from the companies as well.
Okay, but before we get in depth into the finance part, which I was very interested in understanding more deeply, I would really like you to explain the focus of the 4 work streams. There are 4 main work streams within the Cloud IPCEI. How do they support, what are those work streams, and how do they support the project goals?
The work streams are... it's a kind of an architecture of the IPCEI, if you want. So if we talk about the cloud edge continuum, the first thing you need is the infrastructure. So you need to bring together infrastructure providers. So that's cloud providers, might be hyperscalers as well. It might be also the private deployment of edge resources. It might be telco cloud, telco edge. So the first work stream that we have, what we call the cloud edge infrastructure, is precisely that. I mean, it's those companies that are bringing to the project their current or future infrastructure and the new services, new capabilities at the infrastructure level, including, for instance, sustainability, how to make these data centers and these deployments more sustainable, or could consume less energy, or to optimize the consumption of energy at the infrastructure level. On top of that, we have the second work stream, which is about the orchestration, what we call the cloud edge capabilities. And this is about being able to federate all these resources, orchestrate workloads across this, typically virtual machines, Kubernetes clusters, this kind of technologies that create an abstraction on top of that for the applications. On top of that come the applications, and then we call them the more advanced data processing layer, which we're expecting, and we have a number of companies working on different applications on AI or data exchange, service orchestrations, something more tuned for specific use cases. That come in the fourth, and specific work stream for use cases. And one of the particular things at the IPCEI is that we have identifies already 8 strategic domains in which the IPCEI has to be from the beginning looking at. One of them is mobility and transport. We have energy, we have manufacturing, health, smart cities, tourism, agriculture, and media. So these are sectors in which the IPCEI from the very beginning is looking at the needs of the application providers and companies in those domains.
Okay, so you have 4 work streams. They are more transversal. They try to complement the more vertical work that is developed by the companies and the research performing organizations in the projects that are funded at national level or co-funded at national level and European level. Correct? So this all comes together. How does this all come together? So you have this, you've guarantee through these work streams. How do you guarantee these work streams are applied across the different projects that are funded at national level? And are these projects evaluated at national level or at European level? What is the degree of I would say not only competition, but I would say coherence that the IPCEI can bring to this?
Well, we have something that will be also familiar to people working on European research projects, is deliverables. And in our case, we moved to the next level. We have deliverable families, and in each of the proposals for this project, each company had to align their project and their own project deliverables with a number of specific deliverable families in each of these work streams. So, for instance, you could be working in at the work stream 2 level in this abstraction layer on operating systems or on federation. You could also be part of work stream 3 on working on artificial intelligence because you have an application that you want to deploy across a continuum. And maybe a company also has a specific interest to deploy all this within the manufacturing sector. So we already have within each work stream, as part of the proposal preparation for the IPCEI, but also for the individual projects, this mechanism to align the results of individual projects with the overall structure of the IPCEI.
Okay, so from all of this, what are some of the key technological innovations that we can expect? because just give some examples that make this tangible and very clear, but at the same time for people that might not be so familiar. But if you can also give us some examples that that are at the forefront and of what the different entities are doing across the IPCEI would be very good.
So a number of tangible results of the project in terms of technology. So one of them, for instance, having a European federated telco edge offering. So that's something that we don't have now. So allowing telco operators in Europe to bring their new edge infrastructure together, 5G edge infrastructure together, and offer that under common APIs for third parties and all applications to consume those resources and move workloads. Imagine you want to have a virtual machine running some complex AI model associated with a truck that's running on a highway, and you need that virtual machine to be executed as close as possible to the truck that happens to be the 5G tower nearby. That the truck is going to move across borders. We need that VM running on a 5G tower to move across borders. So that is something we need to deliver. Another example, for instance, if you have your own data center, that's many companies in Europe, for instance, if you need to have a hybrid, what's called a hybrid cloud, you need to expand your resources dynamically to consume from public cloud providers for specific peaks in your computing needs. You might want to have an abstraction layer on top, so you can always pick the cheapest option. So instead of getting married, if you want to, with a specific provider, and you might want to. Oh, I'm getting now into muddy waters. If you don't get married with a cloud provider, what's the alternative? You can be. You could have. You need an abstraction layer to be able to move these workloads from dynamically, maybe to the cheapest one. So that's something that will bring an immediate benefit to companies. But right now, when they get too much interdependency with a specific provider, they cannot do it because they cannot simply just move away or repatriate.
So, what would you describe are the key challenges that the different projects in the cloud IPCEI is facing in this area?
I can say scalability. I mean, that's the key topic, the key thing. I mean, how to make this scalable, because I mean that nice figure, that 10,000 edge nodes, that's only the edge nodes. You still have the public clouds. You have the dozens of smaller cloud providers in Europe, plus the hyperscalers, plus the on-prem infrastructure. So how you build something that is able to maintain and support that complexity and hide that complexity to the consumer. The consumer could be your own developer in your company. So you don't want to expose all this.
Making interoperable.
Yes. We need...
In a way as well.
Yes. I mean, with limitations, because obviously, independently of anything, I mean, there are different... We expect this continuing to be made of different architectures, different capabilities. So you will never be able to move things from one place to another independently of what's underneath. So you have to look at the infrastructure. Maybe you need confidential computing, and yes, there's a few options that are available for you. You want to ensure that. So it's about looking at all this increasingly huge complexity of what we call the cloud as continuum, and abstracting that and making that smart in the way that we can also, for instance, use artificial intelligence to optimize where things are going to be deployed, or when something fails in the infrastructure, what other infrastructure is going to take over. Or if you have very specific latency requirements, for instance, where these services have to be located to ensure that dynamically. So that's a complexity.
Well, this is a perfect bridge to another of the challenges that I personally can see here, and I think that you've mentioned in a lot of your literature in the IPCEI cloud, or two other challenges. I'll address them both at once and give you the chance to answer to them both at once as well. One is the cybersecurity challenge, because we this data being processed closer to where it's generated with edge computing, this can raise new types of security concerns. And so it would be interesting to understand what the IPCEI cloud is doing, and how is it tackling the cybersecurity challenges associated with this federated edge computing that is one of the key goals of the project. And the other challenge that I would highlight, also associated with the federated edge computing, is related with what you called sustainability. I would add the energy efficiency component, which is also a very core part of this. And that in ESC, for example, I know that we have some teams that are very, very good at working in this area. So what strategies are at the moment being employed within the IPCEI cloud to address these two concerns, the cybersecurity new type of concerns, and the sustainability and energy efficiency?
Yeah, well, those happen to be the two cross workstream topics that we have in the project. So we have two of those deliverable families or working groups, two specific topics that are cross. We identify from the beginning that are cross work streams. One of them is security, and the other one is sustainability. So they're two of the main pillars of what we'll be doing. Because as you said, we understand they both have implications at many different levels. So the security aspects, we understand as you mentioned before, the transition towards this decentralized cloud to this highly distributed edge is expected to solve or minimize some of the risks. For instance, the ones that are associated with with data moving from where it is produced to these larger data centers. But then it creates some other challenges, obviously. The problem is the developments we're doing at technological level is to ensure that across this heterogeneous infrastructure and different services, the applications can define some of the requirements that they need, and to ensure that this is guaranteed across different providers. So that's, again, it's in a way also a scalability concern or challenge. So as you integrate more and more providers and more different platforms, how you ensure that this security by design can be ensured across this continuum that's very, very heterogeneous.
But there are projects that are addressing this specifically, right?
Yes. I mean, one of the things, for instance, we're looking, now we're a specific case, but that's also with other partners in the IPCEI. There's been also previous investment, and there is ongoing investment in projects, the European the Horizon Europe program level, for instance, on cybersecurity. So we're looking at things like how to ensure compliance with the new cybersecurity schemes in an automatic way, in a continuous way. So we're looking at these things, how we can automate that. Even if you have a hybrid or multi-provider cloud environment, if you need to abide or comply with the specific requirements in some of these, in the EU-CIS, for instance, whenever it's approved, this is maintained automatically, independently of the changes that happen in infrastructure in response to incidents and things like that. So that's the challenge that we have.
And those projects you've mentioned Horizon Europe. So you have these projects that are funded at national level, and then there are projects that are funded at Horizon Europe level that complement more national-based projects.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, the IPCEI is something that's closer to, and it has a component of what we call the first industrial deployment. So it's in the jargon, it's a project with a higher, or projects with higher TRL that are expected to exploit the results of previous projects, Horizon Europe and Horizon 2020, and also incorporate things that we are doing even at the same time in other projects, by same partners or other partners. So most of the partners in the IPCEI also are involved in Horizon Europe projects, maybe in lower TRLs on similar topics. So we collaborate. We have a history of collaboration with one another in other contexts. And the open source technologies that we are developing in Horizon Europe projects, for instance, we can help them through the IPCEI to mature And the other way around, we expect the technologies that we produce to the IPCEI to be adopted more and more often by new Horizon Europe projects in the future as the baseline technologies for their innovation. But yeah, I mean, cybersecurity, as you were saying, it's one of the critical aspects here.
Do you want to develop a little bit more on another one of the IPCEI's goals that is probably already inherent in a lot of what you said, which is this new goal of this federated model, but it's the European open source governance model, and how is it able to accommodate the requirements of the strategic projects that are being led by the EU entities, and perhaps also what are the challenges of this of this process of creating this open source this European wide open source governance model, because it's a huge challenge. I can remember that those challenges start at home most of the times. They don't start at European level. They start with each one of our companies, each one of our institutions, each one of our academies as well. So really would like you to address that one.
Yeah, the main challenge that we have is the fact that we want this technology to be led by Europeans in the long term. So, and that poses a number of steps that we have to take that are not the traditional steps when you want to create and maintain an open source project. So, apart from being the first software IPCEI approved by the Commission, the IPCEI Cloud is also the largest open source project in the history of the European Union, and that's a consequence of the commitment from the Commission, from the DigiConnect, but also DigiCompetition. They understood the potential of open source in terms of spillovers and impact. Also, the commitment from member states to push for their national projects to produce open source and to produce open source together. The problem is we're not used to do that in Europe. We are not really used to develop open source in an institutional way, let's say. So European organizations, even in the tech sector, they are very good at consuming open source, adapting open source, selling open source. So services around open source, but not that much on building open source and maintaining open source in the long term, and do that in a coordinated way with other European organizations.
Alberto, that fundamentally changes the structure of the market mechanism.
We hope so, yeah.
So I think this is very much related with that solving the market failure issue that you've addressed, but in a
it's a different.
I understand, but we can relate it because it's if it fundamentally change. Let's dive in a little bit. What do you mean by open source? In that case, can you give me some examples? Because what is in fact being produced open source, and what is the commitment? What is the degree of the commitment?
Well, I would say, the vast majority, the commitment from the vast majority of projects is to produce everything as open source under an open source license. Beyond that, what we call the integrated project, the IPCEI integrated project. So the technologies that we will need to bring together, the glue that we will need to bring together all these different technologies that the companies are developing, that technology is going to be open source as well. And that will be available for everyone to use, to modify, to contribute to exploit commercially if they want. But we will have to find a governance model for producing together that technology. A governance model that shields, if you want, this technology from the interference of big tech, for instance. So if the approach is, if we are building the technology to bring balance to a market that is right now dominated by big tech corporations, we need to ensure that the control over this technology in the long term remains in the hands of the company that want and the entities that want to fix this problem, not the entities that cause this problem. Even if that goes against the traditional model in the open source world. And
okay, so let's time is running, and let's get back to the member state participation and the impact on the EU quickly, and let's address this a little bit more in depth, but objectively. And we've already touched on that. You've already explained how it went from 7 to 12 member states and why is it significant. But what I would like to understand now is, can it grow further? Can other countries join? Does it need to be a country? Can other entities that are not from countries that have formally joined participate in the activities? Because, I mean, I recall the name of this. This is an important project of common European interest. And not all the member states are represented. And namely, sadly, my own member state, Portugal, is not represented. So, and this is a very core area for all of us, for our lives, for daily lives, and for our economies. And so I'm like to explore that a little bit more in detail.
Yeah. So member states can join an IPCEI. Obviously, they don't have to come to us in industry. I mean, that's they have their own mechanism to discuss with the Commission or the rest of member states the conditions in which they join, the kind of resources they can bring, and the companies. So we've had some changes during this preparation. I mean, we started working on this, and I mentioned before 2020 the declaration from member states. Late 2020, I think they started, France and Germany coordinating with the rest of member states. We had the first matchmaking meeting in Slovenia in 2021. So that's the first time we started to.
It's a long process.
Yeah, it's been a long process. I mean, in permanent discussions and negotiations with member states and support from member states and from the Commission. So it's also very different from the traditional proposal process of a Horizon Europe project. But it's been very, very long. So we developed this very close ties among ourselves, because it's almost like compare that always like a shared traumatic experience. So when you share some trauma with someone, that brings you very close to that person. So I think we, to a certain extent, we all feel that way, because it's been very, very complex, and we've been helping and supporting each other for a long time. But yeah, I mean, at any point, new member states can join, and more importantly, I think what the project defines as a spillover effect, and that's one of the most important aspects of the IPCEI, is not only the commitment of the companies to bring these technologies and help others to adapt it. It's about how welcoming we have to be to companies and organizations from other member states as well, and even outside Europe, to adapt and contribute to this technology. So even the commitment that we have in making the experimental infrastructure and the edge nodes that we deploy for the projects available to third parties. So there's a specific figure for that. So it's 20% of the capacity of the edge nodes that the companies are using for this project have to be available for other parties, including their own competitors. So we have basic competition was very clear on that. We have to help train our own competitors if necessary. We have to make the infrastructure available to third parties. So that's very important. That element of bringing others on board, especially for the open source aspect. So there is a core of companies now developing this, but this is part of that open source governance model. We'll have to open it up to others.
So there is to get into that. If companies from other countries are interested, or research performing organizations, and I keep on insisting on research performing organizations, even though
they as well. Yeah,
I'm more because I know that there are some represented in the IPCEI, and they are important. If they want to be in the core development of parts of these goals and projects, the member state has to adhere to the IPCEI cloud. That's a fact, right?
Yes. Right now until 2026, when we also link to the next generation new funding, until 2026, we don't expect companies or organizations from other than the ones under the member states that are in the IPCEI to join the core, let's say.
And then, to be fair, reasonably, even that 20% that you've mentioned that is reserved for third-party funding, I mean, it will stay home, right? So you will spend that with your neighbor, really.
Well, it's not funding. It's not funding. It's access to what we're doing. So it's access, for instance, to if a company deploys a number of edge nodes, for instance, we have to find a way, and we are working on that, to make that infrastructure available to whoever wants to try the first version of what we deploy. So we have an objective now. By the end of this year, we want to have a first pilot integration of a number of technologies across work stream, from across the 4 work streams. So our commitment of the facilitation group was to have first demonstrator of an integration across work streams by the end of this year. So they will be available to others.
So in fact, you are federating 20% of the capacity of the infrastructural capacity.
No, if you are using IPCEI money to deploy edge nodes, for instance, you might be required to make 20% of those nodes available to third parties if they want to.
20% of the nodes, not 20% of the capacity of the whole.
Well, the capacity of the edge nodes.
All right. Okay. Well, let's not get lost in details. But I was just trying to understand, because it's very similar to what happens in the distributed research infrastructures, for example. But it's interesting. I'll be wanting to come back to this in some time.
Yeah, also it's tricky when in some projects. I mean, they have data. I mean, we have partners like Fincantieri and others that are involved in as you know, in defense projects, all that stuff. Their request is like, or Mondragon Corporation, big industrial groups, and they were being asked, okay, so when exactly, how many days a week people are going to be able to visit your data center? And was like, they're not supposed to visit our data centers. You know? So I mean, it's probably has its own commitment, but the overall message is that even for those companies that are not part of the member states or part of the IPCEI, we have to make not only the technology, but also the resources that are funded through the IPCEI available and accessible to them.
So there will be an access policy.
Yes, exactly.
Basically. There will be an access policy. That's where I wanted to get to in the end. It's very, very similar to what is already in motion in the distributed research infrastructures. And maybe you can get some inspiration out of there if you haven't already. But it might also be very interesting, because I see this cloud infrastructure as a kind of a mix of it's more a technology infrastructure. And there is a policy, rising policy in the European field of bringing all types of infrastructures into the ecosystem, so that we can complete the value chain of research and innovation and translate knowledge adequately from its production up to the market and to the industry. And I see the IPCEI cloud as a type of technology infrastructure, where your role is to get the skills, the capacity to not develop from scratch the needed technology, but actually transform it and develop and demonstrate it and implement it in market conditions, in real live market conditions, for competitiveness, but also in this combination with the open source model. And I find that outstandingly interesting. And it is something that I would like us to come back one day and look back and see, okay, how did this evolve? What happened in the end? It is very, 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 very challenging.
I mean, it's about learning together. There are companies that are more or less experienced. Some of them, they've never developed open source technologies. We call it with other partners, actively collaborating with other partners. So it's a learning process for everyone also to create this new environment.
It's fantastic. I think it's probably one of the most European projects I've seen in that sense, because you are truly trying to deploy this capacity across Europe.
Yeah, it's building these capacities, and the challenge is to maintain them in-house, not to prevent a scenario in the midterm where companies start relying as usual on others to develop their technologies that they need. So this is a commitment also to be in charge and responsibility to maintaining the long-term technologies that Europe needs.
Alberto, what is the role of your own company? What is the role of OpenNebula Systems in the IPCEI cloud?
Well, more generally, we are one of the open source technology providers in the project. So the company develops a cloud. It's a computing platform called OpenNebula. So the role that we have a technological role and also kind of an organizational role. The organizational role, well, I myself am kind of volunteer for the position of chair of the facilitation group. And then we also are one of the two coordinators of Workstream 2, the Workstream that this is building this abstraction on top of this orchestration abstraction on top of the infrastructure. Then at the technological level, we are bringing OpenNebula to the project. So we are offering the main technological product, or the only technological product that the company has, which is the core business is OpenNebula. So we're bringing the technology to the IPCEI. We're opening up the integration framework for the companies to develop drivers and connectors with OpenNebula. We will be also training them in helping us maintain the core and expand the support to other technologies, Workstream 1 or virtualization technologies and container technologies. So we're opening up this technology that to a large extent has been also developed over time with help from EU funding. So it's been through a number, and that's our particular approach to European funding, is that we use European projects to expand and speed up some of the aspects of the roadmap of the technology that we think are more important. So everything we do in a European project, I would say 90%, reverts back to improving the technology that then we offer open source.
No, there is truly a continuum that you have achieved, not with the edge computing yet, but between the European projects and the national and local implementation. And now and it's a loop, because hopefully that will revert back into a coordinated, distributed but coordinated infrastructure service. So that's very interesting. How the majority of these industry partners in the IPCEI help achieve the project goals and are dealing with the factor of open source or vendor neutrality, if you want, and yourself in your company? How heavy is that in the considerations?
I think the what we're seeing within the IPCEI, or as part of both the preparation and now the execution, is a gradual alignment. An alignment between, on the one hand, the strategic vision of the European Union, and very very explicit from the Commission on the needs that we have in Europe for sovereignty at technological level, but also specifically in the cloud market, cloud edge market. An alignment between that vision and what the industry is doing in practice. And then within the industry, we're also seeing an alignment between the tech industry and the non-tech industry. So what we're seeing within the IPCEI for the first time, I think, it's companies that used to develop their own software coming together with tech providers to build what they understand is a sovereign technological solution that is in turn has been requested by the Commission to deal with this market failure and this situation in the cloud. So we're seeing a gradual alignment at different levels. I think it's very, very positive. When we think about how the concept of digital sovereignty materializes, I mean, what are the practical implications of we talk about consolidating or strengthening digital sovereignty? I don't think it's about technologies. It's about the mentality. It's not about developing something specific. It's about changing the mentality, and companies and policymakers and member states.
That's what I was going to say. It's not only the mentality and regulatory frameworks and institutional structures in a way.
Yes, but that comes afterwards. I think the most difficult thing is to assume among all these different actors, especially the private industry, which is harder, assume, I'm going to use an old-fashioned word here, assume their duty in saying, okay, this is the strategic objective. These are the needs that we have at European level, not just for our companies or for our governments, but for our citizens. We need to come together and get things done. As a consequence of that, yes, new regulation comes, new funding programs come, new technology come. But if the underlying mentality is not clear, we're not aligned on that, those other measures will disappear. So that's the difficult thing. And that's what I hope personally that the IPCEI will help to consolidate a shared mentality among public and private entities to understand each other in those terms.
Albert, would you say that the IPCEI in a way is a mission-driven approach to an European goal?
Both a vision and a mission, yes. So I think we are starting to, I mean, that's part of this, assuming this shared vision of how we expect not only the cloud market. I mean, the cloud in the end is a tool for something else, but it's the tool that fuels anything else. Social media, disinformation, access to health services. I mean, it fuels a number of things, positive things, but also a number of challenges that we need to address. All of them. So we are addressing now the fundamental infrastructure that then supports everything else in the digital world. And we are addressing that in a way that thinks could be used in the future to address other problems upstream, let's say.
I think we've addressed quite a lot of what can look like the so-called next generation cloud infrastructure and services. Right. And also how these technologies will shape the EU digital landscape. But I would like you to look 5 years in the future, or 10 if you want. You tell me how many years you're looking ahead or not. But look ahead, and
let's make it 6. So 2030 we'll have already the 10,000 edge nodes. So
there we go. And is that a goal for the project, by the way?
Not the deployment.
Is that a milestone? A milestone, I would say.
Not as a direct outcome, but yes, in terms of having the technology ready for a company to be able to leverage those.
Okay, so let's imagine the technology is ready, right? So what does the EU digital landscape look like?
Okay, so in 6 years' time, 2030. So what I think we'll have is, or what we need to have, if we align with the objectives of the Commission, we need a digital landscape in which the infrastructure is, first of all, distributed around the continent. So it's not only concentrated in very large data centers that are controlled by very few big tech corporations. We have these resources much closer to the devices that are going to consume them. They have to consume less energy. They have to help us save energy in the cloud infrastructure. They have to be more secure as well. But they have to be also a tool for the local economies to evolve and to consolidate themselves. So we need this edge computing, for instance, as a tool for the national and the local economies to have something to say in the digital world and at the infrastructure level. So we need to see more companies, existing companies, becoming edge infrastructure providers, leveraging the presence that they already have in the territory. Tech companies, but telco operators as well, railway operators, energy suppliers, supermarkets. We need them at some point to understand the value of becoming a local provider. And a few days ago, there was some news about Lidl becoming a competitor against hyperscalers in the cloud. They are offering cloud services. So we need companies
There's a huge overlap of that with the grid integration,
Yes,
energy grid integration, for example. For example, for renewable energy
exactly.
and for recharging cars, electric cars.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we need this infrastructure to be powered by green energy locally. We need them to be managed by companies in your territory. I like this concept of the kind of proximity cloud or kilometer zero cloud. So you should be able to relate to your cloud provider in a different way. Why not having many more cloud providers with their own capabilities and their own offerings emerging in our economies? I think that will make the market much more interesting. Still, what we need again is for this market to be played by many other actors. We need a technology to allow companies to consume all these different resources from companies in an easy way, and that's a challenge. It's much easier, super much easier to just consume everything from one, and that's clear.
Okay, let's abstract this a little bit, and let's relate this with the word of the day: sovereignty or strategic autonomy. You relate that, and you have done that already in our conversation. But how would you relate all of this vision of the future with digital sovereignty? I mean, you've said not dependent on the usual suspects, the large companies that are non-European, etc., etc. But what does that mean in terms of in practice for our companies? What does the landscape look like, and what is the position that Europe wants to position as? So, what do we want to be in this area? Is it written in your mission statement? A global leader in cloud and edge computing, and is that part of that vision that you were talking about for 2030?
Yeah, I think that's one of the core elements of that. So I think it's only about gaining more share of the market. So we know, for instance, now even in the European market, the share of the European cloud providers is very marginal. So it's not about just getting more share. I mean, a higher share of the larger share of this market for European companies. It's about, as I mentioned before, ensuring that there is a European alternative, a technological alternative to these platforms. Or ensuring that if someone decides that they want to use resources from local, the national, or European cloud providers, or a federation of cloud providers, there is the platform, there is a technology that allows them to do that in an easy way. So it's also reducing the entry barriers for new infrastructure providers. So the technology that a company needs to become an edge infrastructure provider, we need to offer that to them. So it's as easy as possible and as cheap as possible also for them to become a player in this market, as opposed to just doing something different or building something on top of a platform that they take for granted, a platform that is not controlled by Europeans.
And that is the wonderful side of this project, in my point of view. Alberto, I think it's been a fantastic conversation. You have in your hands an extremely challenging role and project, but also extremely motivating and engaging. So congratulations and full support from our side. So we are going to share all the main relevant links in the podcast notes and also on the Insider newsletter, and anyone can go to this to the IPCEI Cloud website and know more about this fantastic project that is being now deployed and very well run by people like Alberto. Thank you so much for being on the Insider, and thank you so much for being here with me.
Thank you, Ricardo. See you around.
See you around.